Hey, good morning, world. It is Patrick Lovell, Truth Bomb, riffing the con. Truth Bomb riffing the con. That's what I'm doing. On Tuesday, November 28th, 10:02 a.m. my time. And happy post Thanksgiving to everyone. And I guess where I want to start is just the magnitude of the moment. And I'm going to keep it short. I think my frame of reference typically starts with in the morning my sort of routine where I open up my X feed and then I check out all of the different sorts of apparatuses of social media, mainstream media, everything that I read, and I log into my head, and then I move on to try to fit the chess pieces of the daily grind into what's happening to try to move forward what it is that I've been doing now. As it turns out, I think this is 430 Truth Bomb riffs on my YouTube page at Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. And, I've laid out monumental information. And I have 23 subscribers, which is great. And I love you guys. Thank you for subscribing. Please like, subscribe, share. I need to get to millions. I need to get to tens of millions. I need to get to hundreds of millions as soon as possible. And and I've been making headway. I brought this up in several of my truth bombs in the past, like the information I've dropped that my friend Becky Weesey, my great friend, my compatriot, my colleague, my comrade, this wonderful woman out of Ohio, who had really no editorial skill whatsoever. And she just figured out TikTok and she started laying down some of my truth bomb jams down on TikTok. And lo and behold, we ended up reaching on hashtag Patrick Lovell over 2.5 million views, through the con, Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con, and, other hashtags that are associated with it. We've reached over 8 million views. Now, I think by any sort of reflection score, however we want to compartmentalize what those particular figures mean, I think that would be a win in a lot of people's sort of objective, even marketers, for example, right? But yet, unfortunately, those views and those comments and the followers, and I think I've got 131,000 followers at Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con, has not translated to a massive movement that continue to try to catalyze and domino and be this electrified movement that really takes over this monumental ocean of deception and lies and disinformation and distraction and every manner, shape, or form of way you can compositely consider how our bandwidth can be hijacked to take you in the wrong direction. And meanwhile, here's this guy, nothing particularly fantastic to look at. You don't know the name. Most of the American people don't know the name, even though I think with our work that you can find at www.thecon.tv that reveals the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended. That if tens of millions of you understood the blueprint of how you're getting jacked, how our democracy was betrayed and hijacked, and how the entire legal system and our government works for this freaking Borg of diabolical deception in the form of our financial sort of Leviathan that operates in the shadows because they operate in levels that most of us can't comprehend, because it does take a certain degree of an educational level to understand the geopolitics and all that came before, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is a continuum. To fully understand the moment where we are, you'd literally have to have, I think, a pretty concrete understanding of American history from the Civil War forward. Yeah, it certainly helps to go from the entirety of our story from the Revolutionary War forward, and maybe even going back to the days of the Pilgrims and the settlers and everything with North American Indians. But, for what we're in the midst of now, based on the global situation, you really have to go back to probably the Industrial Revolution following the Civil War, that led to robber barons, that led to ultimately the progressive movements that were the kickback because of this struggle of whether or not we're a democracy, a country of, by, and for the people, or we're something else. And we're something else. And if you understand the composite of everything that happened after World War II, I mean, no, you got to understand everything through the Industrial Revolution, to trust busting, to the progressive movements, of course, to the Roaring Twenties, and to the the Great Depression, which is probably the single most important aspect of your education, to understand how things work. But ultimately, that led to World War II, and the Allies' victory over fascism, and ultimately communism through what became the Cold War, and everything that happened through all of these, what they call military adventurisms, but they were all for a purpose. If you consider Korea and what that did to the economy and how that changed things, because we got off of the gold standard, because of, quite frankly, Korea and Vietnam, guns and butter that led to the the end of the gold standard into fiat currency. But what is fiat currency in the vacuum of oil? It's oil commoditization. That's the global paradigm, and that's really pretty much the story. But now we're in an immense sort of titanic shift that's happening because of the power. It's not happening because of the enlightenment, because of millions of people understanding the system, which I'm trying to give to you, and I'm giving to you for free, that cost us millions upon millions of dollars in sacrifice like you can't even comprehend, where I laid everything on the line for this country. Now, yeah, I did it as a gambler, as a producer, as you might call it, a wildcatter, because that's my tradition. Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah, I laid it all on the line because I thought there would be an upside for the truth. But all this country buys are lies. And that's where the American the centrifugal force of power in this country is where power lies. Literally and figuratively. And so where are we? Yeah, I open up my feed every day to X, and then, I see some absurdity from all of the bots and the sex bots and the hate trolls and the Republican freaking circus and these idiots. And then, I must have crossed some threshold yesterday where I did something that got me into seeing more tweets from regular people that you could tell were regular people on Threads, that just revealed how unbelievably stupid most people are. And I refuse to believe that in terms of America writ large. But the people on Twitter reacting to the things that are being prognosticated on Twitter through all of these other imaginary tools of AI and everything else that exists in the tech sphere. It's all an illusion, but that puppeteers all the morons who have no idea what they're doing, and it's propaganda, and it's building this consensus that ultimately, if you want to understand MAGA, which I call the zombie apocalypse, MAGA is literally just the function of new school right-wing conservative billionaires that want to create the sort of plantation capitalism, which would be slavery, which we're not far off anyway because of the new robber barons. And it would help if you understood the history. But the long and the short of it is, that's what MAGA is. You've got a handful of these billionaires puppeteering things behind the system, using these technological sort of rivers that lead us to what is ultimately the platform X. And so the absurdity is watching all things Elon Musk, the richest guy on the planet, who runs two incredibly dynamic, important companies that require the most, and I'm talking about Tesla and SpaceX, and of course, what is it? Starlink and some of these other highly technical and extremely genius engineering marvels that are super hyper important to the modern world. And then this guy, because of all of the things we show you in the con and other things that I just know that you don't, that are unfortunately in a lot of my truth bombs that are, an extension of the financialization of the United States and how this whole thing works, and what was ultimately all of the sorts of things that went into making Elon worth $250 billion, give or take $10 or $30 billion a day, given market fluctuations, given the financialization of the United States, and quite frankly, the world, which is blowing up in our face on a daily basis, and has been, and continues to be. But the reason you don't really fully understand it or want to do anything about it is, quite frankly, the top 5% feeds from it, because the system of financialization and corruption through our financial system, that all roads lead to the Federal Reserve, which is the massive tumor of corruption, in a way that, on the body of the United States, if you think the arteries of all of the highways and byways and all of the financialization and structures and banks and the ways that capital flows, the heart is the Federal Reserve. And the irony is that these MAGAs, most of the population of MAGA, which I refer to as the zombie apocalypse, but what they really are is, the game goes back to where I'm from, Texas, and LBJ revealed this, and I don't know what were the circumstances where he just said what nobody ever needed to hear, but is the formula for it all. LBJ said, if you can get the lowest rung white man to believe that he is higher on the ladder than the highest rung black man, you can pick his pockets all day. Yeah, LBJ, our former president, who followed, of course, Kennedy, who was assassinated because Kennedy didn't want this world. And those who assassinated him did. And LBJ said that. And yeah, that was it. When I heard that, to turn it into the other metaphor that frames my existence, and you've heard me say it a million times, the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. And they were pissing on my head, telling me it was rain, because they thought I was some kind of new fool, which they've done to all of you. And everybody that's out there in this panoply of this reactionary, circus, I refer to as tools in the fool circus. You're getting jacked. You're getting played. And it's so easy. It's freaking, to borrow a term from, I was about to say Shakespeare, but, Watson and, of course, the greatest detective, Sherlock Holmes, which, by the way, those are some of my favorite movies, directed by Guy Ritchie and starring, the man. Why do I get hung up on these names when I'm going through these truth bomb riffs, even though I know these guys like the back of my hand? Robert Downey Jr., right? I mean, look, Sherlock Holmes, and I love those Sherlock Holmes movies because it is elementary, my dear Watson. Your brother in arms, Patrick Lovell, because he is a patriot, because he believes in liberty and justice for all above all else, because he believes in the dynamism of democracy, in the patriotic will of we the people, in life, liberty, and justice for all, because all of those things matter to me. And yeah, I did go to the Marine Corps right after 9/11 to sign up, but they didn't realize that Saudi attacked us, and I thought to myself, why would I enlist in a military that has no idea who attacked us? Which, of course, we did, but none of the staff sergeant or the recruiters have any clue because they just follow orders, right? And that's the whole thing. And I recently revealed this on a recent Truth Bomb, man. I've got this friend, man, who's revealed to me some amazing intel about his experience, 20 years of war in all of the theaters of Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. And this guy's job was to take out high-value targets. Yeah, and he's told me how they do it and what they do and how they do it. I mean, like I told you before, the system, I am the biggest threat to the system. I had this situation on Twitter yesterday with this maggot who was like, talking about, Second Amendment and protecting, the only thing protecting us from fascism is the Second Amendment. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You and your pea shooter doesn't have a chance against the greatest military in the world. You're a dead man walking. He's like, oh yeah, you think my AR-15 can't do anything? And I'm like, what, you threatening me? You moron? Dude, I've got evidence here. I could turn you over to the police right now and get into the crosshairs of Johnny Law, which wasn't my point. My point being is that these MAGAs are idiots, and people who believe that the Second Amendment is protecting us from a takeover, a hostile takeover of tyranny, are the dumbest people in the history of the world. What I'm revealing to you is the tyranny that hijacked our system that nobody can understand because they're all tools in the fool circus. And people accept what's happening to them, even though they're up to their eyeballs in debt and pressure and stress, and they're hanging on by their fingertips and having 2 or 3 or 4 jobs. And those are the people that are the mass, society. The other 10 to 20, 15% at the bottom, they fell down, through the rabbit hole, or not the rabbit hole. They got just bulldozed into the streets, man. They lost everything. They got nothing. And now they're on drugs in a zombie apocalypse in its own way, which is horrific, especially going back to my friend who did high value targets in Afghanistan. He told me that, whenever they wanted, to make things happen, they just had suitcases and train loads and trucks and you name it of cash. that they could just hand out to the warlords and they could just get whatever they wanted whenever they needed. Could the the forces that operate in sort of secrecy for a reason and special ops and everything else take me out if they wanted to? Like that. But they don't consider me a threat because nobody up top considers me a threat yet because they've silenced me. Going back to Elon Musk and this thing that I saw this morning where he said, on, what is it called? Notes, community notes. He's proving all of these things that happen in media that are deception. And the picture that he showed was this young kid at a Kansas City Chiefs football game looking to the right with his profile painted in black. And the depiction said that we can't accept, blackface. And he used that in the culture wars as some sort of like, hey, look, I'm a journalist. I'm going to show you that the other side of his face was painted red and white, just like the Kansas City Chiefs colors. And it was misleading, and we're going to combat that. And I posted to Elon, I said, do you want to stay in the kiddie end of the pool, Mr. Faux Journalist? Or does your twisted, crazy billionaire mind want to join me in the deep end and help expose the $70 trillion truth that made you, by the way, $250 billion, give or take $10 or $30 billion on a given day, that gave you all of the power and the structure that you have? You con artist. I actually called him a punk-ass bitch on his own platform. That's who Patrick Lovell is. You might think that's a little bit, sophomoric. Yeah, there's still a lot of that in me because I don't know. I guess I like, Brother Will Ferrell and, guys like Woody Harrelson. and I don't know, I grew up on Mel Brooks and I love Larry David and I love comedy but I love sports and everything else. I'm an American. I love dynamism, but because I'm competitive and what I was raised as an American, I believe that, yeah, we were once the shining city on the hill only because we had this incredible, population of doers, man. People that created stuff, that did this stuff, that made stuff happen. Yeah, and we're the ones that created all of this incredible technology that is now being used against us and propaganda. I don't write software, but do I have a sense of how these algorithms work? Yeah, and they're fucking ridiculous. And when you go back to I always forget the name of the abbreviation of the KGB force. I think it's SRV, maybe. That the KGB's version of, dealing with all the technologies, efforts of propaganda because they were able to get the pop culture wars happening in 2016, and they did it extremely effectively because we didn't fully understand it and where it was coming from, and it was all puppeteered by the likes of, on the other side, the Mercers and Cambridge Analytica and all that history. It's playing out monumentally on X, and yesterday Elon goes to Israel to meet with Netanyahu. Right? This after that, there's lawsuits and the anti-Semitism and then all of the runs from all of the big companies like Apple and IBM and others because of anti-Semitic sort of propaganda that Elon Musk is actually himself, proliferating. And he's doing it on his platform that he owns, of course, that he financed with somebody else. I think it was a $60 billion buy. I think they said it was $40 billion, but for some reason, someone was sending me figures recently that I think Saudi's into it for $60 billion. So you got Saudi and whatever other dark forces are behind the scenes, and I'm going to say it's going to be the Mercers and the Coke outfits and Sheldon Adelson's, trust, because Sheldon Adelson is dead, but his money's still alive and working, 24/7 on this sort of, unbelievably insane manipulation in service to what? And I used Twitter the other day. I called out Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, and I said, why are you guys bootlicking Tucker Carlson? What is that? Tucker Carlson is a piece of shit, liar, scumbag, and everything he does is in service to this thing that is this griftopia of Steve Bannon and all of the money that was behind January 6th. And I'd like to know more about who they were. Again, Who on January 6th inside the Beltway was able to get special forces and cops to support MAGA to invade the Capitol and stand down the FBI and all of the agencies, not to mention the National Guard, when they could have been deployed in a nanosecond to take out what happened on January 6th? And the investigations that came from January 6th, yeah, they definitely reveal a lot about Trump, or I like to call chump stain. And he is a chump stain because he's a fucking moron. We've got these pictures of him and Epstein for years and years and years. We know that he got his wife from Epstein. We know that Epstein got women from Mar-a-Lago for, being recruited to be the masseuses on Epstein Island. And yet MAGA is like, Trump doesn't have anything to do with Epstein. What are you talking about? January 6th, insurrection, it was peaceful. What are you talking about? Donald Trump is our savior, and we believe in law and order. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was wag the dog, full-on tyranny based on what the entire United States government is demonstrating, that Donald Trump used racketeering through deceptive acts and practices and all sorts of documentation fraud in the electoral service certification scheme to ultimately, configure and manipulate and turn upside down the electoral college to steal the election using racketeering across the board, not to mention corrupt attorneys, which we're seeing so many flip. That's the proverbial rat. Even though those guys are rats, but whistleblowers are not rats. Whistleblowers are heroes who did all this stuff before they were forced to flip because prosecutors have got their lives in their hands, but then also corrupt judges. And we're seeing this Eileen Cannon drag her feet as predicted by Lawrence Tribe and others. Guys, the United States is a sinking Titanic shipwreck of corruption. And it all leads back to what I have revealed to you, and I am the only voice that have said that. I'm the only voice that has said this over and over and over. Nobody anywhere, not the New York Times, not Anderson Cooper, not Rachel Maddow, not dumbfucked, I had everybody at Fox on my mind, which is obviously a rat-infested cockroach, vertical of lies from Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham, and Papa fucking Murdoch paid $487 million for the election booths, Dominion, right? Because they admitted, and that was just like 4 months ago, right after all the banks collapsed, right after Chase brought it up, just after Biden was saying that no, we're not bailing out the banks, and of course the Federal Reserve bailed out the banks, because that is the con. All of this is the con. Everything that the government of the United States is depicting and demonstrating about Donald Trump did. I'm not arguing he didn't. I think he should have been in jail a long time ago. The fact that the judiciary and the Department of Justice and everybody that's on these cases haven't taken him down already, given what we saw with Sam Bankman-Fried going down in a year, just proves that they're just dragging their feet. Why are they dragging their feet when we could literally be on the verge of fascism? But what I continue to tell you already, and I have forever, is we're not a democracy. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism to guarantee the mafiocracy, which is this giant racketeering financial enterprise that loots from the Federal Reserve, the central bank, because they can, because you don't understand it, and now they're fueling fascism. And your buddy right here, Patrick Lovell, is a brawler. I am not going to sit down. I'm not going to take this. I'm going to do everything I can to get tens of millions of you off your ass to join me so that we can crush corruption and drown the fascism it fuels. Now, does that mean I'm saying I'm throwing out there that we got to have a revolution, like the American Revolution or like the French Revolution, where we had the Reign of Terror, and if you understood history, you'd understand that's probably not the best outcome. Or even the Russian Revolution with Putin that led to Stalin. Okay, that's not what I want personally, and I don't think, because here's the reality, guys. There's got to be a revolution. There has to be. Otherwise, there's more going on than what I've said, and I could go on for hours and hours and hours about, the ultimate global paradigm, economic paradigm, premised on fossil fuel first and foremost, but this whole sort of buy-in from oligarchs all around the world that extracted wealth and money from all of their societies through into Western financial markets And that propped up the dollar forever. But now all these guys like China and Russia, what we call the BRIC countries, right? So let's just go through the list. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, okay? These countries have been producing, and they have unbelievable resources, natural resources, and everything that the world depends on. And they're looking at each other going, yeah, let's get off the dollar standard. But the funny thing is they're all so corrupt that I'm not sure they can actually do it because they're all as corrupt as we are. But at the same time, is there reason for them to, get off of the lamb, if you will, or how do I want to describe it? I mean, they just sucking from the teat of corruption, but it's their own corruption because they extract all this wealth, they throw into financial markets, they buy our bonds, and yet we prop it up through the full faith and credit of the United States. And that's what we did in 2008. People, there was a coup d'etat in 2020 based on everything that happened. Everything that happened before, though, was the real coup d'etat, and because of what Obama and Holder didn't do, enabled everything else that came. And by the way, all of the, let's say the DNA and everything that would lead to MAGA, of course, came through the Tea Party, which before that was in John Birch Society, before that was in the Confederacy. And so that goes back to my opening premise that billionaires on the conservative side are looking to create a race war to ultimately create a new, let's call it plantation capitalism. And we're not far from that anyway, because we killed the golden goose in the United States. We basically destroyed all of our infrastructure because of financialization. Because we've created this perverted inverse thing that's based on control fraud and modern executive compensation, and all of that's in my truth bombs forever. But the bottom line is that they got, in 2009 through 11, we unleashed $33 trillion, not $750 billion, which the Obama administration and all the media was telling us, and everybody's jaw was agape and hit the floor. It was like nothing that ever happened in history. We were providing $750 billion to buy toxic assets to create liquidity so Wall Street and the global economy can get back on its feet again, was the story. And the toxic assets were what the financial system created through all of this racketeering, which was all liars' loans and everything that come with it, which is in the con at www.thecon.tv. But we ended up doing $33 trillion to financial operations, financial banks, and all sorts of assets managers and everything else that come from it. But basically that were bankrupted and that their collateral was worth nothing, which means they were insolvent, which means all of the statutes of what the lender of last resort capacity of Federal Reserve Act 13.3 does not allow for. Nobody would be stupid enough in the history of the United States to say, hey, look, what if we let Wall Street create a mob racketeering enterprise that blows up the world? Let's give them everything. Nobody ever wrote those laws for that. But that's what happened. Because that's what corruption is. And now it's taken over Congress, the Supreme Court, the media. It's all a lie. Everything's a lie. And that's why we have MAGA. Because corruption births and fuels fascism. So what's the alternative? I mean, let's go through the list. I mean, can a single president solve this riddle? Is Robert F. Kennedy going to solve this riddle? Well, let me give you this as a kind of an antidote. I know Robert F. Kennedy is buddies, and you can see it with Tucker Carlson. Okay, well, who's Tucker Carlson connected to? Steve Bannon? Who else is Steve Bannon connected to? Now, I don't have the evidence of who Robert F. Kennedy is involved with, but he's kind of like a game for this situation. To further Trump, have you ever heard Robert F. Kennedy be declaratively, viciously, like, are you kidding me about Donald Trump? No. He bootlicks Trump because he wants to pick up some of his supporters because he's a political worm. Is that the leader that we need at the moment? Not from where I'm sitting. Do I think Robert F. Kennedy could get educated very quickly? And if there was a critical mass, could he then start speaking our language? I think he would do it in a nanosecond because he's an opportunist. And yeah, maybe he does want to be the president, and maybe he does want to follow in the footsteps of what his great uncle was on the precipice of doing before he was assassinated by the system that's been existing ever since. But is he in the moment a threat to that system? Not remotely. In fact, I love his wife, Cheryl Hines. Cheryl Hines for president, to all of you Kennedy supporters out there. So there's that. What about brother Elon, Reverend Cornel West? I think the guy's a genius. I love him. I listen to him and I get enamored. I get lost in his poetry and I get magnetized because of his speech. And I think he's a fabulous human being. But yet he talks about systemic predation and racism and the economics of it all without having a clue of how it works. Is it because he's not smart? Of course not. He's a genius. He just hasn't spent the time to wrap his head around it and understand it. Could he? He won't unless there's millions of you that demand it. And do I think he's the guy that should be the president? No, I don't. I think he's kind of too pure heart in a sense. And I think he could also be undermined very easily. And I know he could be undermined very easily. What you need as a president is somebody like me. A guy who knows systems, a guy who's a fighter, a guy who could actually get in the trenches and know how to play political games and know how to make fucking consequences happen. Yeah, I'm that guy. That's what I do every single day and I've done for years of my life, right? I'm a producer. That's what producers do because we have to be competitive. And oh yeah, by the way, we have to be capitalist because money creates projects, by the way, as it does everything in our system. So for all of my brothers out there that want a socialist revolution, it's got to be a hybrid. We could talk about that all day, every day, and we should, as a matter of fact. But if I've made any sense to you and you're hearing me, by the way, this isn't Patrick level for president. We'll see what happens downstream. Maybe I could be a stand-in candidate or whatever. I envision my role in this whole thing because I've already done the work, and I continue to bring these truths and these truth bombs all day, every day. And in the nature, and now I'm hooked up with some fantastic people that are smart, incredibly motivated, and we're creating what we call the Clean New Deal. And the Clean New Deal is got to be this populist tidal wave crusade to purge corruption and drown the fascism it fuels. And oh yeah, by the way, it has to create a situation where we can transition, we can slightly alter the paradigm of how we function as a society, particularly as it relates to the backbone of it all, which is energy, which has to come through renewable energy. I know Vivek Ramaswamy, the rat, Coke lab rat that he is, who's a liar, who's Elizabeth Holmes 2.0. And if you know who Elizabeth Holmes was, she was a fraud. She's in prison now. She's in prison for lying to investors and having big players behind her. That's what Vivek did with these trials with this medication because of inside job that got him $600 million and he's involved with the Cokes. And that's why he's selling fossil fuel up the wazoo as a centerpiece of his campaign. That goes back to the Koch brothers. That goes all the way back to John Society. The guy's just a face and he's there to get people confused and everything else. And it's all horseshit. None of these candidates, none of them, and not even Marianne Williamson that I've heard, and I don't even know where she is. She's probably going to come up later. She's probably fundraising behind the scenes. None of them are going to challenge real corruption. Bernie Sanders didn't do it, even though he was on the doorsteps of it and he had all the information, and I know he had all the information. Same with Elizabeth Warren. They failed us. They play by the corruption's rules. They're not a threat to corruption. I am the ultimate threat to corruption. But the information that I have and who I am in my own private Idaho is not going to do it. I need to transmit this information. I need to get it into your heart, to your soul, to your mind, to your eyes, to your fists, to your legs, to your entire capacity if you believe in liberty and justice for all and the dynamism of the American dream, which is what drives me above all else. Even though people that are very close to me tell me the American dream is absolute horseshit. Yeah, I guess for most people it is, to be quite honest with you. I'm not going to buy that completely because I want to make the American dream open to everybody, but it can only happen through the integrity of law, where you hold power to account. Why? Because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Why? Because of what we learned from 17th century France and, where when a group of men discover plunder in society, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. And as my colleague, Kevin Howard, the great Kevin Howard, said in a conversation we had on Sunday, he said, well, we can't hold power to account unless we have the power. My entire journey came from a partner who was literally Wall Street royalty, who gave me a chance because I had convinced him that the American dream and upward mobility was worth saving. And I had to figure out what the machinations were that created what it was that blew up my world in 2008. And he said, if you can figure out how we went from of, by, and for the people to of, by, and for the corrupt corporation, then I'm in. I went way beyond what he could have ever imagined. And I think I made things very difficult for him. I really do. I don't know that. I can just infer that based on things that happened. I think that people at the high levels of financial society said, you played your little game. It's time to put that to rest and move on. And I think that's what happened. But thank God he did. And as I mentioned in one of my truth bombs previously, it was one of the most remarkable Robin Hood stories of my life. Our company was getting electronic deposits from none other than Goldman Sachs on occasion. Imagine that. The guy that proved everything that Goldman Sachs did and was involved with and continues to do this day, I was getting paid by them to do it. That's who Patrick Lovell is. I'm the producer. And what I've got to do with you and the people that we're aggregating, I've got to find smart people out there, even if you are the top 5%, even if you know that your assets and your stock portfolio and your house and everything went through the roof over the course of the last 13 years because you got paid off. But what I'm telling you, I don't think you'd be all in if you knew it was all a grift. I know that there's really good people out there that are doctors, that are brain surgeons, that are pilots, that are people that have dentists, that have to do things to the best of the possible, execution because you're professionals and engineers and software engineers and artists and all of you who function at a high level. I have got to get you on board. This is the dynamic revolution that will lead to the enlightenment that will purge the darkness that we're all surrounded by, that's run by this global financialization that's predicated on fossil fuel that's poisoning and destroying everything. Who wins if there's a World War III that triggers from what's happening in Israel and in Gaza? Do you think that the system's going to need more oil? God, I've got the revelation of how this system got $70 trillion illegally. $33 trillion in 2009 to 11, another 16 to 20 trillion between 2014 and 2018 because of quantitative easing. There was 22 trillion for the repo run in 2019, and that was all before COVID. Can you hear me? Do you understand what I have? Do you understand if you hate communism, that we are the Politburo? If you hate fascism, we're corporate fascism. If you hate the Confederacy, they're Confederates. Every bad guy that's ever existed is in control. And we've got to kick their fucking ass. And we can only do it with millions of us. And I say kick their ass metaphorically because I'm telling you, I have got access to the smartest, best prosecutors and investigators and journalists and people who can tell the truth in a way that if we had the audience's attention, we could turn it all upside down and hold it accountable. The greatest justice in this situation for me, honestly, is to reveal every fucking CEO on Wall Street and what they got away with, and then confront them, get the freaking convictions against them, unlike what we're seeing with Donald Trump at the moment, and then take away all the wealth that they stole and let them live in poverty for a change. That would be justice in my eyes. So what do we got to do? Am I going to ask you to pick up a musket and go to the streets? If you had an AR-15, you could not take on the most powerful military in the history of the world. Nor do I want to. I want justice to reign supreme. We have got to sell this message to the entire country. I've got 300 hours on the shelf. I've got tens of thousands of pieces of documentation fraud. I've got the entire story, and I've got access to everybody, and I've got to recruit the likes of, honestly, the likes of the entire NFL, the likes of the entire sports franchises who depend on rules to be able to play a game that takes them, to the ultimate dream of, success by being a champion. But none of that happens without a system. Okay? I want to somehow recruit the likes of, honestly, Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift. I don't love her music. I'm not a pop guy. I just think she's cool, man. I dig her. I like everything about her. And yeah, I dig Travis Kelce. I would love to have Travis Kelce on board. I'd love to have the writers of, who am I thinking of who's the executive producer of Saturday Night Live, get this shit, But more importantly, and by the way, I think he kind of does, but he played ball. So I'm a little bit pissed off about that. But, above all, you know what I love to be kind of on our team? The Rock and the People's Claw. Dwayne The Rock Johnson is a smart guy. He's a great guy. Did you ever see his television series on HBO called Ballers? The dude knows how systems work. The dude is a player. And he's a tremendous, beautiful human being. And I love The Rock. Mr. Johnson, if you're watching this, dude, you inspire me to no end. I've got the answers that the entire system of media, of mainstream media, of independent media, and by the way, the independent media, again, of Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi, who's the biggest appointment of them all, and who am I missing? Glenn Greenwald. They're bootlicking Tucker Carlson. Why? Because of Elon? Jesus Christ, are you kidding me? Guys, we've got to flush the corruption down the toilet where it belongs. We've got to have a massive comeuppance, and it's got to happen now. And so what do? Well, I've got all the answers. I need all the people, and we need to come on board, and we need to work together. And yes, I'm going to ask a lot of you to volunteer your time, but if at all possible, in fact, if you can't do this and you can join us and you could spread the word and everything else, that would be magnificent. I would love you to. But if you can contribute $13 to the Clean New Deal and bring in 13 people, we're going to give you a t-shirt with one of our hashtags. We've got great hashtags, right? We've come up with all these hashtags that we're about to copyright. Truth. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Onwards and upwards. Failure is not an option. Rise, roar, revolt. This is the righteous grind. And there's others. I felt like I was doing the greatest hits thing, right? They were selling albums back like 50s hits or 60s or 70s soft hits back in the day on television. You remember those? You could buy it for $6.99. I'm asking for $13. That's it. Now, if you're a person of means and you want to stroke a check for a big deal and you want to come on board and you want to become a partner, yeah, I am going to operate like a new deal, especially on the media side, where I got to create an alternative to all this media that is muckraker media, which I've already got. And if you want to see us make documentaries of everything that I'm saying and get it out on an ongoing basis to where we have real funds to do it, because I'll tell you, the reason why The Con never made it on HBO, I'm pretty convinced of this, and Netflix and everything else, is because the system I'm revealing to you after 2008, they own it all. So when Federal Reserve Act 13.3 kicked in to provide tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the system that blew up the world, the ones who facilitated management was none other than BlackRock. Dude by the name of Larry Fink. He's been around a long time. Smart guy. Look him up. Know his history. Understand who he is, where he came from. Understand the savings and loan crisis. Understand the Resolution Trust. Understand Aladdin. Understand everything that the guy is. And understand where we didn't hear about BlackRock for 10 years, even though he was working with Schwartzman of Blackstone on what? Throughout all of the 2000s until it blew up. Mortgage-backed securities. Oh, yeah. And who put him in control to do that? Yeah, Timothy Geithner. Timothy Geithner was the former head of the New York Fed who's supposed to regulate all this stuff and didn't, because he's one of these bootlickers that fucking does nothing, and then he fell upward to become the Secretary of Treasury under Obama so he could say what? That the American people are going to be foam on the runway for the crashing financial system? How about we turn the tables? I'm not expendable. Chances are you're not either. What I'm saying isn't difficult. You've just been played. It's a sucker play. Everybody knows a sucker play. The thing about being American is the payback. We got to get the payback, and we got to become a country of, by, and for the people. And do I think that all of MAGA are fascist Nazis? No, I don't. I think there's a lot of really good people in MAGA that are like the fucking Democrats are full of shit. They blew up my job. They destroyed my pension. They took the wealth out of my house. They destroyed my life. I'm going with the other team. And they're not wrong. Except going to fascism and Confederate corporate, billionaires that are behind the scenes that want to take us back to a Confederate, capitalistic structure is not the answer. And for you new people, do you have any idea how many tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people have sacrificed for this country to give us the opportunity to not fumble it away, but to make it better, first and foremost? Not to mention the blood lost in wars, but I'll also say all the collateral damage of many of which you grew up with, where your parents got divorced, where somebody committed suicide, maybe somebody went homeless, and then you got stuck with the life of loans where you got to get 2 or 3 jobs. That's not the American dream. And for all of you that are protesting in unions and everything with Sean Fine, you guys are closer to what needs to come together. We have got to create this massive, 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 popular, progressive campaign to thwart corruption, the fascism, and fuels, and it's the Clean New Deal. We'll give you all the details, but I've got the $70 trillion truth. Is there a better way to spend $70 trillion than it going to corruption that is destroying you in everything that matters? Yeah, there is. We could rebuild our infrastructure. The grid itself to go to renewable energy is about $4.5 to $6 trillion. Especially if we do it efficiently, we get rid of the pork in states, and you do this efficiently, and everybody's in. We cannot tolerate corruption anymore. I don't know what it is about people that are below the line, and I guess this goes throughout history, right? You know, I continue to say this, and I got to finish with this. Look, man, I get. Let me backtrack this. I'm not a religious guy per se. Okay, I'm kind of a spiritual guy. I don't know how religious I am, but I do like a lot of biblical metaphors and lessons and everything else. And I'm of the Jewish tradition, and and looking at this paradox of what's happening in the Middle East and everything that could lead to World War III, and the whole idea of Armageddon, and ultimately the second coming and all of this stuff. I mean, the idea in biblical text, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and I guess the evangelicals call the rapture, but the idea is to destroy the wickedness. Oh, we're surrounded by our lies in every direction. Is that not the wickedness? And that's what I'm trying to destroy. And I say, and I do know the story of Moses, and I do know the story of Jesus, particularly historical Jesus, which is a lot of the same kind of stuff that I'm talking about here, okay? That he got sacrificed for. And the idea of the second coming is to create this, I guess what, this world of the believers of peace, and this thing of this tranquil sort of thing where it's all because we've battled the evil, right? Okay, well, guess what? That's what I'm doing. That's what the Clean New Deal is. That's who I am. I've been on this monumental journey that we spent $4.5 million to get, which means 357,000 of you, if you committed $13, would match what we already did. But that doesn't include the tens of thousands of hours, or my divorce, or me losing my American dream and family, and all the sacrifice that came with it. There is no money that's worth. But if you were counting, what my contribution was 13 years plus, $4.5 million, which again, $13 for you would be 357,000 of you. And to finish the point about the rapture and what the Clean New Deal is going to manifest in a very real way, I mean, I'm the producer. I'm not, Moses, but I am leading an exodus against corruption to create the resurrection of the American dream. I'm not Moses. I'm not Jesus. I'm the producer. And the Clean New Deal is what has to defeat the wicked. It's everywhere, and it's so crystal clear to me. Why isn't it crystal clear to you? Can you come on board? Can you reach out to me and my colleagues? Can you help us? Can you help engineer the Renaissance? Can you do what you can to learn, to understand what's real, so that you can become a bulwark against the lies that we're all up against? And can you contribute $13? And if you can, do it now. Do it today. Don't hesitate. And can you bring in 13 other people? There's no time to waste. Guys, it's 2023. We've known about most of this shit since probably 1984. Maybe 1979, to be honest with you. But 1998 was a marquee turning point. So was 2001. And 2008 was like, what? And then everything since is a result of it. Guys, it doesn't get better. It's only getting worse. If you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity and decency and integrity and sustainability and liberty and justice for all, if we merge in unity, we will defeat the misery of tyranny, and that is our destiny. That is the Clean New Deal. Onwards and upwards. Shout out to Apollo 13, of course, and NASA. Anything is possible, but we've got to figure out the solution to the problem. That's what this is. Rise, roar, revolt. Let's defeat the tyranny of misery together, locked arm in arm, millions of us marching on the Capitol underneath the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, where he said, a nation of for and by the people shall not perish from this earth. This is our turn to do it. Failure is not an option. This is the righteous grind. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Onwards and upwards.